Hi, I'm Nick, and I've been in Dubai's property market for over 8 years. And today I am honored to be speaking to Mr. Marco Longhi, who's an ex MP from the UK, from Dudley. You've also built your property portfolio over the past few years, and you've been a property investor all your life. So I'm really excited to talk to you and understand how you did that and what you think about what's happening with the UK and Dubai. And we'll go into a bit more details. But how about you introduce yourself to people here?
Oh, well, thank you very much for inviting me here, Nick. It's great to be back in Dubai, actually. I saw you the first time back in November,
Yeah.
and I guess I was still licking my wounds from my electoral defeat, which was in July, having been first elected to Parliament in the UK in 2019. And you're quite right. I was the MP for Dudley North, now just called Dudley. And unfortunately, I wasn't successful. As much as I worked really hard and put people first and did my best for Dudley and country, it just wasn't enough. I think the country had had enough of the party that I represented at the time, who I'm not with any longer, which was the Conservative Party. So yes, you asked me about my background. Well, what can I say? We are in this beautiful setting here in this studio with what appears to be Roman or Greek statues, and part of my history going back about 1,000,000 years. I used to live in Rome, although I was born in a black country town called Walsall, which is very close to Dudley. I then moved to Rome in Italy when my father, who is 100% Italian, got a job. He didn't have one at the time when he was here in the UK. He was offered a job and he went to work for the national airline, which was Alitalia. And because he carried on working for them for many years, as a family, and we were never well off at all, he was ground staff. One of the benefits we did have was to travel with very cheap tickets. You had, these staff tickets, so you traveled standby most often, which is if you had a room on you waited until the last person jumped on. It was like catching a bus at the time. And if there was room, you got on, and you only paid a very, very, very small amount of money for the tickets. So that was only available for staff and their family. So I always loved spending time in England, and I guess I spent 5 months out of every 12 in the UK, even though I was at the time living in Italy. So I had, you talk about hybrid cars. I had a hybrid upbringing, and I adored my grandfather and grandmother, and I spent just as much as my time with him as I possibly could. He came from a very, very poor background, and everything he taught me, which was about working hard, aspiration, family first, were effectively the values that I grew up with, which were his. But whilst I was going through the education system in Italy, because of all of the flying I did, and because, little boys, they want to be train drivers, they want to be Formula One drivers. I wanted to be a pilot because I caught all of these planes all the time. And I was very, very lucky to be able to go to a school in Rome at the time that, took you through secondary education, whilst at the same time training as a pilot. So that is what I did. But pilots, they are funny people. You either take to a plane naturally, or you are kind of fighting it all of the time when you're in control of the aircraft. And I was never a natural at it. And I decided, I had friends who could listen to an aircraft fly above, and they'd be able to tell you exactly what make and model and how many engines and what specification it was. Whereas for me, it was a plane, and I loved planes, and I loved the engineering that went behind it. But flying them, I was never a natural. I flew. I got my pilot's license, but I decided to move on. And for me, as soon as I came through secondary education, I decided I wanted to go and live in England and be
Okay.
close to my
And
grandfather.
this was when you were?
So I was 19 at the time. So
Okay.
this would have been, well, gosh, I was born in 1967, so it would be 86, 87 when I left Italy, and I came to live
That's a
in
strange thing.
England.
When I was reading up about you on Wikipedia, I saw you've bought so many properties. I thought your parents must have left you millions of pounds, but it sounds like you built that all yourself after having moved to the UK.
Yes, that's right. And I guess I had my grounding in property because although I did want it to go to college, university, if I could when I got to England, and it wasn't a given that I'd even be able to get in with an Italian qualification for
Oh,
secondary education, I did very well with my grades in Italy. And when I managed to get them translated, they were up to standard for the Russell Group, I think it was called, of universities. So I applied, I got accepted, but I knew I had to pay my way through 3 years of university. And so I went to work for my grandfather's company, which was petrol stations. He built petrol stations and carried out maintenance on them. So
this was Manchester.
no, this was in the Black Country in Warsaw, but petrol stations were all over the country.
Okay.
So we'd sometimes travel the width and breadth of the country to work on petrol stations.
While studying.
No. This was before I went to
Okay.
university. So
Okay.
I worked. I laboured. I was a labourer.
Uh-huh.
I shoveled concrete through
To
hot
put yourself
summers and
through
very
school,
cold
yeah.
winters.
Yeah.
Yes, and because I was the grandson of the company owner, it wasn't the case of a silver spoon. It was the case of I had to be given the toughest jobs quite often to make it seem like I wasn't being given any
Favoured,
special
yeah.
favors. Exactly. So that wasn't easy at the time, particularly when you're accustomed to living in Italy, actually, where you had nice weather, you went flying, as I did, and all of a sudden I'm shoveling concrete or cleaning out foul manholes. That wasn't a very pleasant experience. But it was all, I see these passages, these events in my life as character forming. And I've been through so many things. I have my own business, as you know. I've employed people. But I've always had this mantra, which is never really be expecting people to do something for you if you're not prepared to do it yourself first. And that is something that has stayed with me all my life, including my political life as things go. So went through college. I did civil engineering, again, in line with what my background was. But then I decided that I wanted to broaden my scope. So when I lived in Italy, I was always the English guy. When I came to England, guess
You're
what?
an Italian guy.
I was always the Italian guy. And I just thought, although my heart and soul really was in England, in the Black Country, I decided that whilst I was so young, I wanted to try and earn more money, try and travel the world, try and learn a different language if I could. And I set my sights on oil and gas, and that's what I did. I worked for a company called Schlumberger. I was 5 years in South America. I was meant to be posted to Kuwait. But then the company said, sorry, we can't offer you the job anymore. And they said, well, we have to wait until the war is over because Saddam Hussein has decided to invade Kuwait. So I might have perhaps joined the Middle East when I was in my early 20s, but I didn't because of that war. And I ended up saying, no, I really want to work for your company. And they said, oh, well, we'll post you somewhere to South America then. And I said, well, where? Oh, we don't know. Just go to Caracas, which is our headquarters, and we'll tell you which country you'll end up in. And that was the life I was leading then. Probably the toughest thing I have ever done was joining that company. It had a very, very high attrition rate. When you work for this company, in a nutshell, oil company drilled a well, and Schlumberger was called along to decide and explain to the oil company with evidence, where the oil and the gas and the water was, and if it could be produced, and an indication of the quality of the oil and
Okay.
gas and that kind of thing. And here was I trained to do that when some 75 to 80% of the people who tried to join couldn't make it. And I really found myself at home there. I've always had a knack for solving problems in any walk of life. If I put my mind to something, if I see there's a problem, I somehow come up with a solution. And sometimes it's instinctive. I can't explain sometimes how my brain gets to that
That's
point.
an engineer's brain, they say.
It's probably an engineer's brain, yes. And it worked well. I wasn't trained as an electronic engineer, and a lot of the product that I offered the customer at the time was being produced from electronic equipment that quite often failed. And so I had to find a way of making it work in some way.
Okay.
Yes, I had to deal with explosives. I had to deal with radioactive sources. I had to deal with quite dangerous environments. And I did that in South America for a good 4 years plus. And it was tax-free at the time. I wasn't resident in the UK, and I got paid danger money. And that, I saved it. A lot of my friends at the time decided to work hard and play hard, which meant spend hard. I decided to work and save up because I wanted to be able to buy a good property when I went back to the UK.
And this is when you were how old? Is that
20? My goodness. How old was I? I was probably 25, 26.
So as a young 25-year-old, you wanted to buy a house?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Okay.
For me, when I think about what is one of the most important things any individual can do in their lives, one of the most expensive things, and one of the things that can be so cumbersome and difficult for them to achieve. That's the purchase of your own property. And so I worked really hard, and I guess I could have bought the house outright, but I didn't want to do that. I decided to save some money separately, buy the house, but have a mortgage, because interest rates were okay at the time.
Back then.
And because I knew I needed some working capital, I always wanted to own my own business, invest. And if you want to become a builder or own your own development company, you have to invest. You have to buy more land. You have to buy equipment. You have to do lots of things, which requires money.
As a 25-year-old?
Yes.
Okay. So you bought your first property at 25 years of age, 25, 26?
Something like that, yes.
Okay. And then how did you progress?
It feels like a million years ago.
Yeah. But how does one progress to the next 10 or however many you must have bought and sold? And what was the idea behind it? Because most people your age back then would have been partying and spending money. But your plan was clear at the time that you want to build wealth and you want to build a portfolio.
I did. I guess, my parents were never well off. That was absolutely clear to me. I saw sacrifices that both of them made in order to try and give me the best education. And I'm one of 4 children. And I obviously knew my grandfather's history and the extreme poverty he came from. And I just thought I want to work really as hard as I possibly can. I've been given these gifts. I felt I was so lucky to have had that education and had then that incredible opportunity to go and work and do well in South America as I did. And I said it would be unforgivable for me if I just wasted it away. And I wanted to invest, and I wanted my children, if I thought I ever could possibly have children, to have even more opportunities compared to the ones I had. But looking back now, I think I had the best opportunities. It was a different world then compared to the world that we live in now. And although we probably had tougher times, my generation had tougher times, it was also a slightly simpler world and life.
Okay.
That the pace of life now what, information technology does these days. It's so immediate. It's so instant. It's tough. And I saw that even in politics. So that you want to know the journey. How did I go from buying my own home to then developing a little business as I did with...
Yeah.
You're right. I do own 10 properties in the UK. So I started off, well, one by one. Initially, with the money I had, I went into business with different individuals, different people, and I bought property which you could buy at the time from auction houses, which were very, very run down, and you bought them therefore at a severely depreciated price, often repossessions. And there was enough money in that game, if you like, to be able to buy it, refurbish it, and to a good standard, and sell it on. You now have these programs on TV, Homes Under the Hammer and bargain properties, whatever it is they call them, these programs now, and absolutely everybody sees themselves as a property magnate. And a lot of people, of course, have done well out of it, but those bargains aren't there to be had anymore. Some people feel that if they go to an auction, they absolutely must buy, and it's probably the wrong thing to do. I actually probably think that going back to the traditional methods of dealing with an estate agent with properties that have been on the books for many years and trying to negotiate a better outcome is probably better and safer than buying at auction these days. So over many years, my initial years, I bought and sold, but I realized I was making some money, not a huge amount. I always wanted to offer a property that was a very good standard, so I probably actually ended up spending more on the property than I might necessarily need to, but I always wanted to be known for quality and a very good quality property that didn't have any problems or any comebacks afterwards. And so I bought and sold, but then the penny dropped. Marco, if you're going to carry on doing this, yes, you'll make a bit of money. It's becoming more competitive. More people are starting to buy property in this way. What about your pension? So I'm in my 30s and 40s and thinking, no, I really need to change that. So I decided, well, I'm going to change it by investing in property and holding on to it.
Okay.
And inviting people to become tenants of mine. And at the time, interest rates were reasonable. So I bought my first property, did it up, invited a tenant, and I worked out that the rent I could charge was roughly what my outgoing was for the mortgage. So I wasn't really making any money.
Okay.
The way I was actually making money in the long term was that I'd worked out clearly that over decades, properties just go up in price all the time.
Yeah.
There is only one direction. There's always a bit of a correction.
Yeah.
But then it fairly quickly recovers, and more people are born than properties are built. So demand will always be there. That was the very basic logic that I used, and I've done well with that because properties have acquired in value over time. Of course, I've had to have investment and maintenance in that. I've had to change kitchens, I've had to replace boilers, I've had to deal with unhappy tenants from time to time, but I've tried to help them. And so over time, then interest rates remained low for a very, very long period of time, and I thought that was a good time for me to invest and borrow a lot more money. And that's when I bought land, I built property, I then bought property which I refurbished, and I now have this small portfolio of property. I mean, there are those who have got 100 properties or several hundred properties.
Yeah.
I'm not like that.
No, it's not small at all.
Look, I have tenants who have been my tenants for 15 years plus, and some of them I consider friends, and I will go out for a meal with them. And I'm a different kind of landlord to the stereotypical image of a landlord in the UK. Landlords immediately, or you call yourself a landlord, very bad people. But that's not true.
It's everywhere,
Many,
really. Yeah.
many, many landlords I know only want to look after their tenants and earn an honest income from an investment that they've worked so hard all of their life, as I did. I know I worked really hard. This was never given to me. I had to borrow money. I had to take those risks. I had to have those sleepless nights thinking, is that loan going to come through or isn't it? Am I going to have to sell the land? Can I afford the cost of building? Is there suddenly going to be a property crash whilst I've just had this enormous borrowing? I took risks. I could have chosen to just go and work for a government institution or for another company, and I'm not worried when my next paycheck was coming. When you're self-employed, you worry every night when your next paycheck is going to come in. And so that's how I build things up. But yeah, that market has changed a lot in the UK over the years now. The UK as a country has changed a lot over the years. And I'm terribly sad to say that it's just not the same country it used to be. And yeah, and it's when I come on holiday like I have now again to Dubai with Andrea, my wife, who is Brazilian and loves the weather here. But she loves more than just the weather, you know.
The UK weather's been chasing you. So it was raining when you came. It was raining
Yes,
yesterday.
that's right. So it's like it was hovering around 1 or 2 degrees, 0. We're not blessed with the best of weather, but you know, the British people, Black Country people, I see them as a long-suffering people. They want a country to be proud of. They want a country where things work. They want a country that I remember from 30 years ago. They want a country where I remember my grandmother, with her trolley would go to the market in town and try and save 5 pence from this stall for a bag of potatoes, and have me as this 12, 13-year-old walking with her to help her. And I wanted to give her the 5 pence to not have to walk across town to try and find the savings. But I guess she was brought up in the post-war mentality of never throwing anything away, saving as much as you possibly could. And it's so different now. I mean, there aren't so many successful markets anymore. And of course, it's a very different kind of market now. And, it's, dare I say it,
So there's a report
it's
from
not as safe as it used to be.
there's a report from UBS on this point that alludes to the fact that the 3.06 millionaires that are in the UK are going to be 2.5 by 2028, and about 6,700 of them came to Dubai in 2024 alone. Why do you think that's happening?
Well, I mentioned earlier that I'm of a conservative disposition. I'm a conservative-minded person. Therefore, it will come as no surprise to you that I feel a government that will have lower levels of taxation, allowing people to keep more of the money that they have worked hard to generate themselves. British people in particular, they're happy to pay a certain level of tax as long as their children can go to the school of their choice. They can go and see a doctor when they need one. If they need hospital treatment, they can get in quickly and be sorted out. They can walk down to go and do their shopping at the market and feel safe. A place is clean. If you do have to queue up for something, you can queue up in an orderly manner. And I remember, as I traveled the world in my early days, that the British queue used to be something worldwide famous and renowned for. I don't see these queues anymore. I see people fighting and shouting, and I see people dropping litter on the floor. I see a disrespect for the place they live in themselves. These things have changed, and unfortunately they've changed for the worst. And it's when I come to places like Dubai where you cannot see a single bit of litter on the floor. It is respectful. It just reminds me of the times of Britain, England of 30 years ago, and how it used to be. And it makes me angry. And it was one of the reasons why I entered politics in 2019, was for that. And it's why I'm still very passionate about that. And I'd like to feel I am optimistic and hopeful that we can get our country back and take it back to what it used to be. I am glass half full rather than glass half empty, although I guess as an engineer I'd say to you that if it's half full or half empty, the glass is twice as big as it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean,
but yes, so
we are happy to welcome your British people to this country. So,
look, why are these millionaires all coming to the UAE? Why are they going to Singapore? Well, it's obvious. I think a lot of these people would prefer to be in the UK. It's a fantastic country for so many different reasons. But when you realize that the majority of the time you're spending working, you're actually working to give to the government. And then what you expect from it in return is the schools, the hospitals, the GP services, and all that. And even that is not there. You then start asking yourself the question, well, if the work I do can be done from a laptop anywhere in the world, or even if it's more than just a laptop, if you have to set up a bit of a business elsewhere, like I'm seeing as I'm staying in a hotel here in Dubai, I can hear people talking about property all of the time. And it's not people my age, it's people much younger than me. And I'm proud of the fact that they are doing this.
yeah,
I want my daughters as soon as possible to be able to own their own property. I hope they end up doing what I did at an early age as well. So once you're on the ladder, you're on it. And commit to whatever sacrifice you have to commit to. Work hard to get onto that ladder as quickly as you can, because that's not just a ladder, it's an escalator that's moving. And the sooner you jump on, you move with it, even if you've borrowed and sacrificed to get on there. So invest is what my advice to young people would be. Invest in property. And even if you think that maybe you've invested when prices are high, even then, in the long term,
yeah,
as long as you're not aspiring to make a quick buck and sell quickly,
yeah,
in the long term, property will always be the right thing to do, if only to secure your own independence. Because people will rent principally because they can't afford to buy. But if you stop and do the maths, quite often, if you sacrifice and really save up to get that deposit, do it. And if you can't do it in this country, well, do what I did and travel the world and see if you can earn perhaps more money elsewhere, or do whatever it takes. Property for me is the key thing for a stable future. If you rent,
it's just
I
money
see it
going
as
down the
dead
drain.
money.
Yeah, yeah,
And well, if you have such a high income that it doesn't matter, then fine. But if you can buy, especially the place that you are living in yourself.
okay. What's the first thing you probably noticed as just as a tourist coming to Dubai? What's probably the first things you noticed that were different from the UK?
What strikes me?
Everyone knows about the safety and all of that, I'm sure. But is there anything else that you observed that you found that the UAE is doing better?
I mean, safety. I don't want to underplay the safety side of things, because I could literally be in a restaurant, leave my wallet and mobile phone there and forget about it and come back an hour later. It would still be there. Here there are very serious penalties for people
Yeah.
who steal or take something that's not theirs. And it might be seen as a very imposing, dictatorial way. It's not as liberal as a society, but actually, here in Dubai, I feel very comfortable. I feel I have everything that I want. My daughters would be very happy, feeling very safe here.
Yeah.
Whereas, my daughters in the UK, I'd be quite concerned about if they were out at night. I'd be quite concerned about what company they were keeping, and the spiking of drinks, and who they might find in the toilet these days. This can get a little bit like, a conversation around genders, but I don't really want to go down that route. And so, yeah, things have changed to such an extent now in the UK that it is very noticeable when you come to a place like Dubai here. As a businessman, I would say it seems quite easy. I've made, obviously, as a businessman, I can't stop thinking about business, but I'm here on holiday. But as a businessman, I can say it seems to me as if there's a lot of red tape you get in the UK that you don't get over here. There's less. I'd say that there is an element of red tape here that can be probably frustrating as well, and you have to jump through certain hoops. But show me a government anywhere where they don't make you jump through a degree of hoops. But generally speaking, it seems less arduous to set something up here. It's clear to me that the Emirati are looking to attract investment. Pretty much zero level of taxes. If you're a business, you pay something like 8-9%, I think it is. What will be corporation tax over there in the UK. So if you're a small business in the UK, you still have to pay best part of 20%. So very high levels of taxation in the UK. It's the highest it's ever been. And this is why you are seeing this brain drain of people who want to set up and go elsewhere and keep a lot more money of the money that they are earning. And this is what, unfortunately, it was happening under a Conservative government, but I always knew it was going to be much worse in a Labour government, and it has turned out to be that the more taxes you put on business, the less they will invest, the less they will employ.
Yeah.
And if you're an entrepreneur, and as I say, you are inherently, if you're younger and you're mobile and you can take your laptop with you, which means you take your business with you, well, then why wouldn't you want to live elsewhere where you have such a higher standard of living? So you asked me what's different about Dubai and the United Arab Emirates, the standard of living generally.
What about the cost of living as well? Because people associate Dubai as a very expensive place. Have you noticed that,
No, I wouldn't say it is particularly. There will be some things that you might find are a bit more expensive. So you can buy in any supermarket here in Dubai anything you will find as a supermarket in the UK, whether it be a Sainsbury's, a Morrison's, or a Waitrose, or whatever, you will find here. Now, some of those items may well be more expensive than in the UK, that's for sure. But if you wanted to know what the cost of a litre of petrol was, it's actually cheaper to buy a litre of petrol than it is to buy a litre of water.
It's about 50p right now.
So there are a number of things that are cheaper here, and there are a number of things that are more expensive. So it kind of balances out, in my opinion.
I've lived in the UK, and I felt like the governments or the companies there know exactly where to hit you. Like, they've figured out it's much more mature market in general. So from insurances to the general cost of living, whereas in Dubai you can pick your lifestyle. You can choose if you want to spend £1 million at a club in a night. You can do that, or if you want to, save up money and for a deposit, and so it offers you whatever lifestyle you want. It's not like, because all of my friends, young friends in the UK, they're just not able to save because of the cost of living crisis, from the rents to the energy bills to insurances. They just feel like every paycheck that comes just goes on to living expenses.
That's right. So we have in the UK, unfortunately, some of the highest energy prices in the G7 and in Europe. And why? Because they're subsidizing this net zero push, which we all want to leave a planet that's greener for our children and grandchildren. And I absolutely believe that that can be a good thing. But when it means that ordinary working class people are having to really suffer very high energy prices, that's when it becomes wrong. And when it becomes this religion, this dogma almost, that it has to be pursued come what may in that way, when it becomes unfair, particularly on the people who can least afford it, that's when I think it's wrong. And if we as a country can afford to spend literally billions and billions of pounds on on wars and on other things that you could argue we shouldn't be, then one of the things I think we should be doing is not spending so much on initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why didn't we 10, 15 years ago invest so much more of that money on nuclear power stations? It's a very clean energy. Not everybody agrees with that, but it doesn't produce carbon like fossil fuels do. But, you know, this government seems to think that it's okay to shut down our oil and gas, and we've got plenty of shale gas, for example, that the Americans are now producing in great quantity. So fuel costs in America are much lower. But we still consume that fuel, but all we do is import it. Mm-hmm. You know, we do consume that fuel, and we will for decades to come. So we should be producing it, but we should also be investing at the same time in the renewable energies that we know the planet will and is moving to. It's who pays for it and how we do it that's important, and how we transition to that I have difficulties with sometimes. And of course, by having such high energy prices, what is happening to industry in the United Kingdom? Well, all of the gadgets and widgets that we used to make as a manufacturing country is increasingly going to India, to China, to Turkey, where they absolutely do not have the same standards. And coal-fired power stations are being opened, not closed. So we are outsourcing our carbon footprint to China, who will then sell us that product more cheaply because we can't afford to make that product in the United Kingdom anymore because of these high energy costs. So we import it instead. But guess what? That carbon is still being pumped into the atmosphere in China. Mm-hmm. We are buying it, but it's being made in China. And the atmosphere and the environment doesn't have these borders. It's still blowing around, and we're still breathing it in, and it's still causing climate to change. So we've been a bit foolish, I think, with doing it the way we have been.
And that's where the regulations come in that you were speaking about with the CBAM.
Yes, so there is something called CBAM.
Yeah.
Some people call it cross-border adjustment mechanism or carbon border adjustment mechanism, which will mean that in the EU, and the UK is doing this as well, any goods, or there are many goods that will be
coming into
described
the EU
as, for example, steel, and steel will account for most products, well, many products, coming into the EU from China, from India, from Turkey. It will be taxed. Unfortunately, that means that the consumer pays. Mm-hmm. And but what that will do is it'll start creating more of a level playing field for manufacturers in the EU and the UK when they've had all of these goods still produced by other countries at a very high carbon cost to the atmosphere, whilst businesses have been importing those products very cheaply into the EU and the UK. But if those goods can only now come in with a high level of taxation, because we know how much carbon has been produced and pumped into the atmosphere because of how those products have been made wherever they've come on from the planet, then it starts leveling up the game, doesn't it? And I suppose it makes it fairer, but as a conservative, I don't like seeing taxes applied, because consumers will again end up paying for it. But I suppose in this one instance, it's possibly arguable that it might even have a positive impact on some businesses, because they'll be then able to start thinking about manufacturing more of these products locally, rather than just being undermined and undercut by countries who just don't have the same environmental manufacturing standards as the UK and the EU.
Okay, well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I've met your daughter, and I know that even her, as a young 24-year-old, has a very clear mindset about investing, and I think this is one of those things which I was deeply missing in my circle of friends in the UK, which was that the mindset to build wealth just wasn't there for a lot of people there. Um, Partly because of the cost of living crisis. And also, like you said, maybe some people should actually think about moving to places like Dubai, which are tax free, which helps them save more and get into property earlier, or even if it's stocks or whatever it is. But I think making a decision on investment is important, more important than just not doing anything, because then the prices just don't stop for anyone, and it's becoming more and more unaffordable to get into property.
Yeah, so I am not an investment advisor. All I can do is speak about my own journey and
Yeah,
my own experience. And I know that younger generations now are facing different set of problems than I faced. I know sometimes I felt the problems that I was being confronted with are unsurpassable. But if you put your mind to it and you dedicate the effort to it, you can make it work. I'm absolutely convinced. I've seen it myself. You know, there are some people who will hold down 2 or 3 jobs, and there are others who are just quite content to just drift in and out of a job without particularly earning any great income, and it's just a different attitude and approach to life. And I guess that's how one is brought up. And when people leave after having really worked hard, and they live in a country and they can see that sometimes the state looks after and makes it easier for those who've had less of a hard-working attitude throughout their journey through life, and penalizes the ones that do take risks and work extremely hard, those are the people who will leave the country, and those are the wealth creators. We now have a government, unfortunately, in the UK that feels that the more they pay the public sector, they think that that's how a government will be successful and that more money will be generated. But it's not. It's the small businesses, and it's large business as well, and that generates the tax revenues that pays for the things that we want: the care in the community, the GPs, the schools, the hospitals, these things. And of course, people working for a governmental institution does pay tax, but overall, the actual wealth that pays for all of those other things are the businesses. And the more businesses close, the fewer there are, the fewer of these millionaires that you want to keep into the UK because you're just taxing them too much, the less of that money will be around, and there'll be a tipping point. And I think that the government can see that happening now. I think they're beginning to panic a little bit.
I think a good example to prove your point is that whoever is being penalized over there is coming over here, and they're adding to the success of.
Do you see that yourself as
I see that on the
as an
daily.
investor? Are you seeing many British people coming over yourself?
On the daily, yes, I see a lot of your countrymen who are just a bit sick of working in the UK because they feel penalized, like you said, and they're not.
And things don't work for them either.
Yeah, so with the tax that they're paying to receive healthcare is something that they're not receiving. For the roads and the infrastructure, they're not receiving whatever they're paying for. They're just not getting it back. I don't know where it's going. You would know that better.
I've rented a car for this holiday. I'm here with Andrea, and we want to get to know the UAE as much as possible. So I decided to rent a car, and we've driven now many, many miles. I've not come across a single pothole. Not a single pothole. What
Yeah.
does that tell you? And there's a lot of tarmac here.
Also, when these people come, so let's say you've got a property now, and regardless of whether you sell it or rent it, either way you don't have tax. So now it's easier to put that money back into the next one, and then the first one is the hardest, and then the second one, it comes from the first one, and then that's how people are building their portfolios here.
It's the same everywhere, isn't it, Nick? The
Yeah,
first ones are always the hardest, and
yeah,
that was the hardest thing for me. Once you've managed to get that first one going, and you can get over the line with that one,
yeah,
the second one is a little bit easier because you use the lessons learned and then also the leverage the wealth you've generated from the first one to get to the second one, and then the third one, and then the fourth one.
yeah.
So yes, that happens in the UK as well. But now the construct, the taxes, the legal frameworks, all of that now are just so burdensome in the UK. The regulation around so much, and cost of living, infrastructure that's lacking and has been there for a very long time and needs to be reinvested in. It's very sad to see how it's gone. I mean, look, I don't want to paint the UK as being this horrible place. It's got so much to offer, and I absolutely know things can get much, much better, but it's going to need a radical change and a completely different outlook. It's going to mean some very, very different, and it will mean controversy as well. And there will be people that will be shouting from the rooftops about how wrong some of these things might be. But if we want to return to a UK that we once knew, and if we want to build on some of the successes that we actually do have in the UK and grow those, then we have to do that. We have to invest and make those tough decisions. I remember the whole debate around Brexit when people were saying, "Oh, but we mustn't become the Singapore of Europe, must we?" And I'm thinking, Brexit, well, why wouldn't you want to become the Singapore of Europe? Isn't that the whole point? Isn't that what's happening with Dubai? So because of Brexit, you can actually mean that you can have much lower levels of taxation and attract some of the EU's millionaires to come and live and work in the UK, and some of the other millionaires from across the planet to come and spend their money and invest in the UK and grow the economy so much more and so much more quickly, and invest in the infrastructure. And that's when you start seeing better healthcare because there's so much money in the system, better schools. There's some fantastic schools here in Dubai and in the UAE. There's some fantastic hospitals, and that happens not by mistake. That because there's investment. One of the things I heard from you, I think it was, that here the healthcare system is you'll pay a couple of £100, I think you said,
For insurance annually, and then
annually for health insurance. Now, God forbid you mention that in the UK. If you say that, oh my God, you've got this thing called the NHS in the UK, which is consuming about £200 billion in a year. 200 billion. That's 200,000 million pounds. That's like a massive number. That is the GDP of Portugal, just on our healthcare system. And people will say, there aren't enough doctors, there aren't enough nurses, you can't get appointments, what's happening, what's going on? Why is that? It is in the top 3 or 4 worldwide on the planet employers in terms of the number of people being employed. Well, why don't we have enough doctors? Why don't we have enough nurses? Where are all these people who are employed in the NHS? What are they doing? So what's wrong with perhaps buying some insurance for your healthcare? And then you say, you buy this insurance and it's what, 10% you say that you have to pay for your bill?
It depends on the plan you get, but yeah, it's 10 to 20% of the cost that you have to pay, and then the rest of it is covered by the insurance. And it
Yeah.
runs like butter. There's a doctor every time you go, even
Yeah.
late at night. Whatever is covered in
Right.
your network, and it's a bit like the US.
Now, I'm not advocating we do that in the UK, obviously. I'd like to see an NHS that works, but I'm just highlighting that as a system. We keep talking about the NHS as being this fantastic thing in the UK, but then I come to other countries, whether it be in Japan or whether it be in Dubai here, and I see systems that work that much better. And I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute. How much of my tax that I pay into the system in the UK goes to the NHS? Well, £200 billion, I'd say a heck of a lot. But I don't get out of the NHS what I want and when I want it.
You'd be surprised how many people actually come to me, and because of situations like this, where they have paid their taxes throughout their life, and on the one day they need it, because other time you don't really need to go to the hospital.
Quite, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the one time that you do need in your life, which is usually after the 40s or 50s, after having paid taxes for the past 30, 35 years. The one time they needed it, they couldn't get healthcare. And then they would have, they went private and paid cash for it because they needed.
So they are having to pay twice
Yeah,
for the health care they need that they've actually paid for probably multiple times over
Yeah.
throughout the course of
Yeah.
their lives through taxation. That's the situation we're in. So, I mean, I don't know what proportion of a person's national insurance contribution goes to pay for the NHS. But I'd be thinking, well, if I can save that money and then if I need an operation, I'm only having to pay 10% of it because the insurance pays for 90%. I'm going, I think I might take that deal.
Yeah, I mean, that's why
It sounds,
people don't mind paying. They just want that service.
yeah.
And that's what Dubai is really good at.
Well, it's what I said to you earlier. The British people don't mind paying taxes.
Yeah, yeah.
But for the last 15 years, that tax burden has just increased in one way or another, whether it's on business or on the individual. It's increased so much more, but then the level of service they've been getting has been just reducing. So that gap between the amount they're paying and they're actually getting out of the system has just become untenable for so many. And that's why those who can walk are walking. And that means that the tax receipts that those people were paying in the UK into the system now isn't there anymore. And this is what our Chancellor of the Exchequer doesn't understand. Tax these people more, they will leave. And
right.
more of them will leave.
I'm very happy about that. They'll come to me. But yeah, it has been a pleasure speaking with you and getting to know you since November, I believe. It's very rare that you meet someone who loves his country that much. And I can see that every time I speak to you. It's very similar to how I think the reason this government or this country is successful is because the leadership just loves their country. The people love their country. And all they care about is just making sure it's successful. Yeah, it's been amazing speaking with you.
And I love this place. I love Dudley. I love the Black Country. I love England. I love the United Kingdom. I love Rome. I love Italy. I have been so lucky with my life to get to know so many different places. But I want my country back. I want it to go back to what it used to be. And that's going to require a big effort and some big changes. And I think that is on the horizon. I think the British people are now waking up to the fact that change needs to happen. And I want to be part of that change.
Reform needs to happen.
Okay. Of course.
Okay. Yeah, all right. I think we're short on time. So, but yeah, it has been an absolute pleasure getting to know you. And I hope we keep meeting in Dubai and look forward to seeing what you do in the UK.
Thank you very much.